On a December morning in 2010, a young Tunisian street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi set himself ablaze. This desperate act, fueled by years of frustration with corruption and economic hardship, sent shockwaves across Tunisia and beyond. Bouazizi's self-immolation was not just a personal tragedy, it was a spark that ignited a tinderbox of discontent across the Arab world. From the bustling streets of Tunis to Tahrir Square in Cairo, ordinary citizens rose up to demand change. Social media platforms became virtual town squares where grievances were aired and calls for protests were amplified. The Arab Spring was not a monolithic movement with a unified leadership or ideology. Each country had its own unique set of grievances, its own cast of characters, and its own trajectory. Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Spring, witnessed a swift and relatively peaceful revolution that ousted longtime dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. Emboldened by the Tunisian example, protests erupted in Egypt, a regional powerhouse long ruled by Hosni Mubarak. Millions poured into Tahrir Square, demanding an end to his three-decade rule. From North Africa, the flames of revolution spread eastward, engulfing Libya, Yemen, Bahrain and Syria. Libya, under the iron-fisted rule of Muammar Gaddafi, descended into a brutal civil war that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Syria, under the Assad regime, faced the most brutal response of all, transforming peaceful protests into a devastating civil war. Tunisia, the nation that sparked the Arab Spring, emerged as a rare success story, albeit one still grappling with challenges. The swift overthrow of Ben Ali and the subsequent transition to a multi-party democracy offered a glimmer of hope for the region. Tunisia adopted a new constitution, held free and fair elections, and witnessed a peaceful transfer of power. However, beneath the surface of democratic progress, Tunisia continues to grapple with deep-seated economic woes, political polarization, and the threat of terrorism. The promise of economic opportunity that fueled the initial uprisings remains unfulfilled for many Tunisians, leading to frustration and disillusionment. Despite these challenges, Tunisia stands as a testament to the power of peaceful transition and the enduring desire for democracy. The country's ability to navigate post-revolutionary politics offers valuable lessons for other nations emerging from authoritarian rule. Section 4. Egypt, from Tahrir Square's euphoria to disillusionment. Egypt, the Arab world's most populous nation, witnessed a roller coaster of hope and despair following the heady days of the Arab Spring. The ouster of Hosni Mubarak, who had ruled with an iron fist for 3 decades, was met with jubilation and a sense of limitless possibility. However, the euphoria of revolution soon gave way to the complexities of building a new Egypt. The military, which had stepped in to oversee the transition, proved reluctant to relinquish power, casting a long shadow over the nascent democracy. The Muslim Brotherhood, a well-organized Islamist movement, capitalized on the political vacuum, winning the first free and fair elections in Egypt's history. In 2013, the military, backed by popular protests, ousted President Mohamed Morsi, the Brotherhood's leader, in a coup that plunged Egypt back into authoritarian rule. Section 5. Libya, descent into chaos and the shadows of what could have been. Libya, under the 4-decade rule of Muammar Gaddafi, was a nation accustomed to his idiosyncratic brand of authoritarianism. When protests erupted in 2011, inspired by the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, Gaddafi responded with brutal force, unleashing a wave of violence that plunged the country into civil war. The international community intervened militarily, with NATO launching airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces. Gaddafi's regime crumbled, but in its place emerged a patchwork of militias, tribal factions, and competing governments, all vying for power. Years after the fall of Gaddafi, Libya remains mired in instability and violence. Section 6. Yemen, a nation held hostage by conflict and suffering. Yemen, long the Arab world's poorest nation, has been ravaged by a complex and brutal civil war that has pushed the country to the brink of famine. The conflict, which erupted in 2014, pits the Houthis, a Zaidi Shia rebel group from the north, against the internationally recognized government of President Abdrabbuh Mansour Hadi. The conflict escalated dramatically in 2015 when Saudi Arabia, leading a coalition of Arab states, intervened militarily on behalf of the Hadi government. Saudi-led airstrikes have killed thousands of civilians and destroyed vital infrastructure, exacerbating an already dire humanitarian crisis. Yemen today is a nation on the brink, with millions facing starvation and the United Nations describing the situation as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Section 7. The Unfinished Spring. A legacy of hope and ongoing struggles. The Arab Spring, a period of unprecedented upheaval and hope, has left a complex and contested legacy across the Middle East and North Africa. While some countries, like Tunisia, have made strides towards democracy, others, like Syria, Libya and Yemen, have descended into devastating conflicts. The uprisings demonstrated the yearning for freedom and dignity that pulsed beneath the surface of seemingly unshakable authoritarian regimes. The Arab Spring shattered the myth of Arab exceptionalism, the notion that the region was somehow immune to the winds of change sweeping the globe. The struggles for dignity and self-determination that ignited the uprisings continue to this day, albeit in different forms and contexts.